Buenas, bienvenidos a este vídeo de unplandivino.net, por así decir. Y vamos a seguir con el taller de la relación de alma gemela con Ana Pilar y Ana C, desde Argentina y desde Venezuela. ¿Qué tal, Ana Pilar? Que ayer no pudiste venir.
Hola, muy buenos días a todos. No pude venir, no, pero me estoy poniendo el día. Gracias.
Y Ana C, desde Venezuela, ¿cómo vamos?
Muy bien. Realmente es la continuación de ayer, que estuvo excelente. Y
Sí.
bueno, estoy animada
Sí.
mucho para hoy.
Muy bien, pues silenciaros y vamos a ver esto, que hemos tenido además un percance antes, que se me ha apagado el ordenador y a ver si ahora no pasa nada.
Bien.
I just wanted to ask about what you said before. We've experienced that when we've been apart, we're very connected to God, God-focused, very strong connection to God. When we come together, we become very focused on each other.
Yep.
So the God part falls apart.
Yep.
So then we're very conscious of that now. So, we're totally, always focusing God first, God first, God first.
Yeah.
I know now everything just falls into place beautifully once we prioritize God.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, like, how you two do that.
We have the same issue,
Same
issue, and what we do, instead of trying, see, most people would say, let's go and separate them because we're not getting closer to God. What my feelings and Mary's are, let's work out why we're involved in this rather than involved in this and this. Do you know what I mean? Let's go through the emotions of why we connect to each other in this regard and step away from God when we're together. Does that make sense? And there's usually a lot of emotional reasons for that we need to address, each of us need to address. Yeah? So in my case, there's a lot of pleasing Mary emotions that I had to address. In Mary's case, there was a lot of feelings of like, God doesn't want her, God doesn't, God can't remember her, God doesn't want her, those kind of feelings that she needs to address. Does that make sense? There's different emotions for each of us that cause us to go away from that connection. The key is to deal with those emotions. Let yourself feel your way through.
Y dice, permitirte a ti mismo hacer tu camino atravesándolos. No dice dejarse llevar, como no es lo que suelo traducir después de que el traductor automático lo pone. Así que no es dejarse llevar, eso lo corregiré luego. Vale.
Yeah, and sometimes we've gotten caught up in resolving the emotions that are between us and forgetting to just pray about it all, and we just remind each other all the time. Yeah.
Can I just one more thing? Is it possible to reach a 20 seconds for your state on Earth?
Yep. Yes. That's hopefully what we'll be able to demonstrate to you. That's why we came.
Cool. Yeah. Just the experience that I was talking about yesterday, if Monique starts having the same experience and we start coming together in that regard.
Mm-hmm. That'll trigger lots of different emotions. Yeah, certainly. Because remember how when you came together a little bit, you started feeling like, whoa, this is a bit much for me.
Mm.
Starting to want to back away, so that's in both of you, and you need to allow yourself to feel that.
It's like as well, like I'm really into this thing about longing at the moment. How before I was talking about the longing and what kind of space that is. Also with the longing for God, I feel like you can have injury and develop a longing. And when you develop your longing for God, then that really triggers all the emotions that are in the way. Same thing with your soulmate. If you develop that really raw, vulnerable longing, it's going to trigger everything that's in the way. So obviously, you know, we're not in the 21st sphere now, but we can still develop the longing to a point that sort of pulls us up. Yeah.
In a sense, so for us, what it is a process of everything we remember we have to grieve, because most of it's about loss, right? So everything we go through, we generally have to grieve. So we have to be prepared to do a lot of grieving, right? And that's sometimes the difficult part. I'm not at the moment very prepared to grieve much about myself, and Mary's not prepared to grieve much about a number of things, and so that prevents the connection from actually occurring. When I'm prepared to grieve and she's prepared to grieve, things get back into track again, and we start progressing towards God and towards each other again. For many of you, it will be different emotions. Shame, anger, grief, rage, you know, all these different emotions are all preventing the connection with your soulmate. But when you think about it, they're also all preventing your connection with God. So of course, having to deal with them with your soulmate is going to help you a lot with dealing with God. And obviously, if I put God first, then I know I'm always going to progress no matter what my soulmate does. So if my soulmate stops progressing, I'm going to keep progressing. And if she has the same view as that, then obviously there'll be this thing going on where she'll progress a bit and then I'll feel a bit stagnant, but because she's progressed, it makes it easier for me to progress, and then I'll progress a bit more and so forth. Does that make sense? And you end up in this sort of moving up like that, you know, one helping the other, helping back towards God. If you take God out of the equation, which, by the way, many, many billions of people do, and billions of souls in the spirit world do, then you'll get to a point where, in the sixth sphere, where you just can't progress any further. So you'll have a soul connection with your soulmate, but you won't have a soul union with your soulmate, which is a totally different experience. If you can imagine the emotions at the sixth sphere compared to the seventh sphere, the seventh sphere is like 1,000 times more powerful emotions than the sixth sphere, right? So if you can just imagine what it's like to then be in the eighth sphere, ninth sphere, 10th sphere, or whatever, in terms of the emotions and what you can create, it starts to really blow your mind. And of course, mentally and intellectually, we can't conceive of it. And you'll see in the Paget messages when you read it, sometimes Paget asks, you know, what's it like there? And they'll say to him, look, there's no way that you can actually conceive what it's really like here with your intellectual mind. Does that make sense? They'll just feel that. They just feel it. And there's no way you can until you personally experience it emotionally. Now, Jen brought out a good point that I'd like to just highlight, and that is, if you have faith and trust in God, it is the simplest way to speed up your progress. Because you know what our biggest problem is? We want everything to be intellectually validated to us before we allow the experience. And if you're one of those people who want everything intellectually validated before you allow an experience, that's going to be the slowest possible progress that you can make. Right? So my suggestion would be to have a look at that emotion in yourself and try to deal with that. What's that about? And you get down to some feelings of where you've been hurt in the past and can't trust anymore and all those kind of things. Let yourself work your way through those things. A lot of times, a lot of people hear all these things presented from myself and Mary, and they feel like, oh, they're just describing a utopian universe. Yes, of course we are. That's what God created. One of those things, a utopian universe, right? That's what God created. Man creates the other. God created the utopian universe, and we're trying to describe to you what it's like. Does that make sense? Yeah. Do you want to just describe what has happened between us? Like,
Sure.
Yeah. Where should we start?
What do you want to illustrate? Just how the emotions affected different things?
Yeah, how the emotions affected desire, how they affected your own feelings towards myself and my feelings towards you, and how, you know, once we release certain emotions, how things change quite rapidly and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So should we start when we first met? Let's do that. You want to describe it from your perspective? Come over here, sit down with me, Ben, and describe it.
Well, when I met you, I thought I knew I was going to meet this guy that my parents were quite into at the time, who was teaching the spiritual path and believed he was Jesus. And I kind of had this image in my head of sort of a middle-aged kind of guy with a beard, bit of a pot belly. Someone who fancied himself a fair bit. And then I met AJ and I was like, wow, he's kind of good looking. What I expected. But we didn't have any long exchange because I was quite wrapped up in lots of other emotions. But I was quite interested in the path he was teaching, and I tried to ask him a few questions, and he just sort of gave me like yes or no answers. And so, what do you think about this Course in Miracles stuff? Because I feel like this, and I feel that's right. And he's like, yeah.
That's true, I did do that. It's very unlike me, isn't it? But anyway.
And anyway, skip forward a bit, and my parents told me that AJ felt that I was his soulmate, and that really affected me. Like,
what did you say? It's embarrassing.
They sat me down and had something important to tell me, and I had absolutely no idea what it was going to be. And they sat me down and they went, well, you know that guy, AJ, you know that guy? And I went, yeah. Well, he believes that you're his soulmate. And I went, oh, I knew that. Like, first thing out of my mouth. And then I went, no, I didn't know that at all. That's really weird. He didn't talk to me. And so I was really shocked by the words out of my mouth, but I completely dismissed them because they didn't make any sense.
So Mary sort of felt like I never talked to her, right? Which is very true. I didn't talk to her very much at all. And I was sort of like, for me, the emotion was I was just so overwhelmed emotionally because it was like that, how I described, you know, walking past somebody or that you're open to emotionally now. And I just, wow, this girl's my soulmate. What do I do with that? Like I've been looking for such a long time, and there was lots of emotions in me. I felt quite teary. I didn't know what to do. I was just about to talk a group. I think Helga and Klaus were there at that group or whatever, and Peter and Claire, I think, were there. And I, you know, I didn't know what to do. I just like, what do I do? Like, and inside of me, that's what it was like. You know, like, and she comes up and talks to me before the group starts, and it's like now I'm like I don't know what to do. And she asked me, as she said, these questions, and of course I didn't have much to say about them because I just didn't know what to say. So what do you say? Do you say, yeah, actually, yeah, you're my soulmate, and yeah, now that I think about it, boy, I've got a really big attraction to you, like you know, like very connecting, and I could feel. I was extra sensitive to Mary's emotional condition. So I could feel her hurt from a breakup of a previous relationship. I could feel how uncertain she was feeling about her life. And I just felt like if I said something to her that it would just like, it would basically just sort of put more pressure on her. Basically, that's the way I was feeling.
Yeah, obviously I didn't have the same magnetic thing happen that AJ had towards me. Yeah, but then when my parents told me, I couldn't let it go. It was really, I didn't understand, and I'd never seen a DVD. They didn't exist back then, and I'd only heard him talk for a couple of hours, and I was really, but for some reason I had lots of other things. I had a job in Lebanon, and I'd just broken up with someone, and like all other kind of things happening in my life, but I couldn't let it go. It was really, I just would sit outside and do that a lot. Like I couldn't understand why I didn't even know half the stuff about the divine love path. I didn't really, but I just was really shocked. And then I got quite indignant. This guy has told other people and he hasn't told me, and I'm gonna find out about that. So I sent you an email.
Mm-hmm. Now there was a fair bit in between those two places though. Because we actually caught up at Helga and Klaus's and did another talk, and I did anyway, and I arrived at this talk thinking that Mary wouldn't be there because I could feel that Mary was a bit angry with me by this stage.
No, I wasn't by then, but at the talk you started talking about.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you started talking about something.
But your father was quite angry with me by this stage.
Yeah, but I thought that AJ was actually talking about, I hadn't decided if God existed or not in my life at this point, but AJ was talking about the closing of the heavens, and I thought, hang on, this guy's talking about an unloving God. Suddenly I had all of these really strong opinions. That is not right. That, and why is he saying he's Jesus? If he was Jesus, he wouldn't be saying he's Jesus. And I really, like, all of this emotion came out, and I got really quite angry. Graham would remember, and Elka would remember. I wasn't saying very much, but obviously the emotion coming from me was quite huge. And
emotion in me was a fear of my soulmate's anger. So there I am sitting down trying to talk about things, and my soulmate's projecting anger at me, and I'm just going into like meltdown that I'm trying to avoid. And so these little children were coming up and sitting on my lap and distracting me through the whole process. Of course, children are great like that.
Los niños son muy buenos en eso, a la hora de cuando uno quiere, como hemos visto en otros casos del taller, uno quiere estar distraído en el fondo del alma, pues los niños te lo hacen, o sea, te lo sirven. Los niños son geniales en eso.
And I was in this turmoil, inner turmoil.
This is before I knew about the soulmate thing.
Antes de que ella supiera, antes de que Mary supiera lo de las almas.
And I, of course, had no idea about the impact I was having on AJ, because I thought he didn't even know who I was. And when we left that meeting, I was I had such a weird experience of emotion that I made I was with my parents, and I was like, I don't know what's going on with me. I need chocolate. Like, I was very like, I don't understand.
Yeah. So then a few weeks later, we did the first talk at Peter's place at ULO, and I could feel that Mary was thinking of coming, and that just like put me into this place. I was actually down. I don't know if you've been to Peter's place and walked around the gardens a bit, but down by his office, you can walk down the stairs, and there's this little tiny private place down there, which I went down into, and I just sat there like shaking. Just shaking, not because I was worried about talking in front of 100 people, but because I was worried about Mary rocking up and knowing by this stage that she felt a little angry from the previous experience with what she'd been talking, and I don't know how I was going to cope with that. And then I realised that she wasn't coming. I was almost a relief, that to not have Mary come, and so I never saw Mary again until I went overseas after that. And so I didn't see her before I left to go overseas or anything like that. But I could feel that, wow, she's really angry with me.
I could not understand why I was angry, and I wouldn't have even said I was angry. I just felt like there was no reason for me to have any, my parents have been on a spiritual path for 30 years. I've met a lot of people who believe a lot of unusual things and have unusual lifestyles, and none of that ever made me angry. I just went, oh, that's what they're into, whatever. But for some reason, I was really very emotional, and that was really strange for me. And when I found out what AJ felt about me, I felt really freaked out as well. Like, I don't understand all these emotions, and it's very scary for me.
Yeah. The first time I met Mary, Cornelius was with me, and we drove away the next day because we stayed overnight at Mary's parents' place. And I drove away the next day, and he said to me, "You think she's your soulmate, don't you?" And I said to him, "Corny, if she's not my soulmate, I've got another 10 years of emotional processing to do." Because I was getting pretty overwhelmed, like just being in the same house with her. But that all being said, like Corny spent most of the time talking to Mary, and I spent hardly any time talking to Mary, and I was just so nervous that I didn't know what to do really. And I had a lot of emotions to work through as a result of that. A lot of emotions of feeling unworthy, a lot of emotions about feeling the soulmate blocked to me, and feeling a lot of grief about that. Yeah. And so I started allowing myself to work through those emotions. And I then went overseas, and I just kept working through those emotions. And then Mary sent me that email that I told you about earlier, where she demanded of me why I hadn't spoken to her about this supposed soul connection that we were meant to have had. And that's when I sent back a very long letter. I decided at that point, well, no, I need to be open. I need to be honest. And this is why I'm encouraging you to do the same. Just be open and be honest, and just let the chips fall where they may, and allow yourself to experience the emotion of that. You know what I mean? Or just allow that to occur. So what happened over the following months was that we entered into conversations, and eventually came conversations every day. And then Mary decided that she wanted to investigate whether I'm her soulmate or not. And we
very pragmatic about it.
And Mary's very practical, right? So she decided, no, I'm just going to sort it out. I need to get over to where you are at the moment. By this time, I was in England, right? Or before then, we were in Barbados, and we decided this. I was in Barbados, and Mary's in Australia, and we decided, no, let's meet up when we're in England. So Mary flew over and met up with me in England. Like, I picked her up from Heathrow Airport, and we spent a week. We decided the best thing to do was I'd hire a 2-bedroom place, and we just spend a week together and see what happened, right? And see what comes up. And 4 days into that week, Mary has her first big emotional experience.
Yep. And so I really thought that I kind of had my life together. I was pretty arrogant. I thought I've lived overseas, I've dabbled in spirituality. I kind of feel like I'm finally getting close to 30, and I feel like I finally know myself. And how ridiculous. Anyway, so I go to meet AJ, and I have no concept of really what emotional processing is. I think I know what it's all about, but I really have no idea. And 4 days in, I have this overwhelming emotional experience of grief and loss and abandonment, and it's inexplicable, and it relates specifically to him. Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, and there was quite a lot of anger towards me that you couldn't understand, because you've never really been an angry person most of your life, right? And there's quite a lot of anger coming at me. You left me, like yelling at me about what I'd done to her in the past, right? And it's really hard to explain, because it was like, and then Mary went into this really big shutdown, towards me, no, I can't even look at you, can't even look at you. So I went off for a walk out in the sheep farms. We were at Oxford in England, and
A terrifying experience.
yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if that's relevant to other people.
But many of you are going to be terrified with some of the things that come up between yourself and soulmate. Right? And the key is, I feel, to stay in the transaction. Right? See, a lot of times what we do when things that are terrifying come up, we don't want to stay in the transaction. We want to get away from the transaction. We want to leave it. We want to avoid it. We want to avoid our emotion of it. And my feelings are, like, the more we have stayed in the transaction, no matter how long the transaction's been, like it sometimes has been months before we've come out of one particular emotion together. And the longer we stay in the transaction, the better both of us finish up working way through our emotion. Yeah. So then Mary had a number of these experiences, which of course I was sort of expecting, but not.
You didn't expect
I didn't
her to be
expect
angry.
that she'd be angry with me. I thought, you know, soulmate, meet soulmate, all lovey-dovey, everything's fine, right? Not on. Like, that didn't happen at all. Instead, a lot of the stuff of me leaving and me dying in the 1st century, and all this kind of stuff started coming up, and it shocked Mary intensely because she wasn't expecting that.
So before this point, I was actually feeling quite romantically attracted to AJ, quite desirous of him. Yep. And as soon as I hit these big emotions, nothing. I didn't want, like, by the end of the trip, I just felt no physical, emotional attraction to him at all.
So by the end of the trip, we're coming home, and I can just feel like my soulmate's just totally blocked to me. But I can feel the reasons why, like all the fear and terror that's in her, and so I could feel it in Mary, all this fear and terror, but shutting down really harshly shutting down herself too, right? And
because also by this stage there was a lot of projection coming from my family, and that really affected because I was very hooked into their emotions. That shut me down a lot. There was a lot of disapproval coming towards me, and so I felt that that also made the emotions towards AJ wrong emotionally.
So I wanted to stay in this transaction and work our way through it, but Mary just said, no, that's it. Like, there's no attraction between me and you, and we've just got to go our separate ways. And so what happened was we came home, and at the airport, Mary's parents picked her up and whisked her away, and literally, and I went home with my son Tristan. And I just spent the next 4 or 5 days just crying about it. And Mary, you sort of spent the next week really in turmoil, didn't you? Like total turmoil about it all. And then Mary decided, she invited me over to talk about it on the weekend, and I went over to talk about it, but I finished up just getting attacked by the family instead of really just talking about our issue together. And after I came away from that, I realised that actually things were going to get worse, a lot worse with the family, and there's a high likelihood that we wouldn't be together. And for me, that just triggered lots and lots of stuff. And so for the next nearly 3 months, I spent basically, I cancelled all of the talks, as many of you around that time know, and all I did was just focused on my emotions about dealing with that, and just stayed in my emotions. And as I said, I got to some really deep emotions about how I viewed myself in comparison to my soulmate, and all these other emotions. And once I got out of that, I knew within a few days Mary would probably call me. But Mary went through that time, went through lots of different things too.
Oh yeah, that was really dark for me. Because I didn't know how to process emotion, and I was in terror, self-attack, total fear of it was hard for me to have a soulmate desire because of the whole bigger picture of identity. I felt like my whole life was falling apart. I didn't have any direction, and there was a lot of pressure around me to shut down emotionally.
And what actually, I think it was you processed some of the anger you felt or rage one weekend, wasn't it? And that caused you to give me a call the following weekend or something? Is that what happened? Or
no, I actually decided I wouldn't. I tried to stay on the divine love path because obviously I felt it was the truth. And so I tried to stay connected with my emotions, but there was just so much inside of me that I was resisting. I couldn't do it. And I did connect to a little bit of anger, but then I just felt so despondent. And I said, that's it, I'm not doing it. I'm not on the divine love path. I'm not even going to pretend anymore. And I actually, after 2 weeks of that, became quite suicidal. I felt like I didn't know what I could do. And that's when I called you.
Yeah. That's right, yeah. And so we just talked again, and I just said to Mary that, look, you don't have to be with me, but I'd love to be able to help you connect with your emotions and stay on the path if that's what you want. But you need to decide what you want, basically, but I'm happy to support whatever that is. And so we finished up talking a bit then, didn't we, on the phone about your emotions. And I think within a day you connected to some big emotions about God that helped a lot. Yeah. And then Mary started to come along to the groups a bit, like still very tentative, weren't you? Still very quite mistrusting of myself, but tentatively coming along, feeling the judgment now of some in the audience, towards it, because some now knew that I felt Mary was my soulmate and so forth, and feeling quite bad about that at times.